But I think this dorsiflexion here in the trail wrist is basically the holy grail of ball striking. Well, let's put it this way: if you don't have it, you will have great problems, in my opinion. So let's talk about this. But first of all, I want to talk to you about the wrists, if they actually mirror each other. This is actually quite interesting to look at. Actually, this is my wrist. These are my wrists from the lead hand. So you can see I from address to top of backswing, I had about 40 degrees. And that's very typical, I would say, for an elite player. I see 40 to 50 degrees, sometimes 30 degrees. But it's in that ballpark, I would say, most of the time. The interesting thing, though, is when I measure the better players, I see that the trail wrist actually has hardly any radial deviation in the backswing. So it just goes into extension this way. Of course, you will see some patterns where it goes towards radial as well a little bit, but it's by far not as much as I see with the lead wrist. Okay, these are my the things I see when I coach better players. So I think that's quite interesting. They are not doing the same thing. Yeah, and if you, pardon, if you look at the trail wrist from the flexion extension point, you will see that during the backswing, it's very typical that the trail wrist extends about, I would say, 40 to 60 degrees. And no matter what the lead wrist does, we know we can have a lead wrist going more towards extension or more towards flexion, rather neutral. But I actually have never seen the trail wrist go in the opposite position. So maybe somebody has. If you somebody saw it from an elite player, let me know. But it's very untypical that you have not such amounts of extension in the backswing. So I would say giving a ballpark number 40 to 60 degrees compared to the start is pretty normal. So I think that's very interesting. So if I don't see some proper amount of extension in the backswing on the HackMotion, in the HackMotion software after I measure the swing, it's a very obvious sign that he let go of the grip or something. So the connection of the grip was lost here. And if I see that, that's something I will definitely check, and that's the problem I will address. So I look at basically both hands, and if I see something really weird, then I will address this hand. Okay, so I won't talk about both or just the lead wrist. I will actually have a look which hand is the problem, and then that's where I focus on with my teaching. And also, this is quite interesting. I see this a lot of times as well. I mean, there are different patterns with the lead wrist, of course, how it comes into the ball. We've seen that like Scott just talked about wrist option 8, that it actually goes more towards flexion with the lead wrist and actually stays stable or goes into extension around the impact zone. And of course, we know the patterns where it's a little bit more extreme and you extend earlier. But that what you see here on the screen on the left side, on the lead side, that's basically something I would say very typical, what you say with the lead players. And you can see that the wrist is basically neutral at more or less at impact and going towards extension. But on the other hand, the trail wrist, you can see on the right side that there's still an amount of extension in the wrist, and after impact, just a little while after impact, you will see that then it's changing into this flexion. So it's not happening at the same time. You would think it happens at the same time, but it's actually not. At least I don't see it very often with the lead players. So to have a little review of the first part here is both wrists and arms should be observed and measured, definitely. So use the HackMotion sensor on both wrists if you have one. Focus on your instruction on the weakest link you see. So if you see something weird going on in one of the wrists, then go for that, and you will be surprised how often it will be the trail side actually. And both wrists and arms, of course, influence each other as long as they are connected. Okay, so if they're not connected, you can see funny things. So that's talking about the lead and the trail hand compared next to each other. But let's get a little deeper into the holy grail of ball striking, and that's we're going to talk about my friend, your friend, Doris. Okay, there's a little story to that, so I will talk about that in a second. What you see here is something I've seen with every elite player so far, and that is at the top of the backswing. You can see the graph here on the right side. You can see there is a certain amount of extension, and then from P4, so top of backswing, to the last shaft parallel, which is called P6, as you might know, you will see an increase of extension, or I call it a dorsiflexion, just a fancy name, Latin name for wrist extension. So they actually dorsiflex their trail wrist in the downswing, okay? And that actually, when you do that, that does a couple of things. It helps, of course, to close the club face a little bit earlier, which is something I really like. It also helps to move the center of mass more behind the body. And to move the center of mass behind the body is basically necessary to have a proper pivot, a proper body rotation in your swing. See, if you get steep here in this position here, and that you will get that if you go in this direction here towards flexion, you can see the club is tipping, the pitching in this direction, then you will also stall your body rotation. So for me, that's a very, very important thing you want to have when you look at the downswing. What it also does is, and I would ask you to actually look at the video now. I will stand on a little podium so you can see me. It's this dorsiflexion or wrist extension also triggers a better trail arm action and structure. And we're talking about external shoulder rotation. So just if you're not aware what external shoulder rotation means, picture that you are doing some arm wrestling and you're actually winning. Yeah, that's called an internal shoulder rotation, this movement. So that would be in the golf swing a movement like more like this here. And if you lose at arm wrestling, you lose against the opponent here, that's called external rotation, external shoulder rotation. And what you want as a player is a little bit more of external rotation. And the interesting thing is, if you actually just hold your hand like this in front of your body and you try to go into extension or dorsiflexion, you will see that my elbow actually is moving more towards the target already. So it's triggering actually a more external rotation. Compared if you go this way, like more in a flexion, you will see the elbow tends to go more on this side. So it helps the structure of the elbow as well, if you just think of this piece here. So also, what is interesting is if you have excessive early arm extensions. If I go I go here with a little bend here in my elbow and I extend the arm, you will see that my hand's turning down a little bit like this. So you're getting internal rotation. So that means in a golf swing, if you have too much early extension here, you will get also here more in this type of position. So that's just something you want to be aware of. And one interesting thing, because we've been talking about lag and about what is lag and what's the definition. I mean, basically, I think lag is the look in the visual form, that the created angle between the club and the forearm. So the thing is, if you have a proper amount of extension, dorsiflexion with the trail hand, it will look something like this here. See, it looks like this. If I go the opposite way, it will look like something like this. So it's, I think the visual look of the lag actually happens more from the flexion extension part of the trail wrist, because of the lead wrist as well, but mainly that, because it's moving much more than the lead wrist typically. It happens much more from this movement than the radial movement. So just something you might want to think about. So that's what I expect in every elite player, that during the downswing, they will add some dorsiflexion. That's something I like to look at. So how can we learn this move? Okay, so you can see here, I'm talking about the grip, and I've seen when the grip actually is in a very ulnar position, it's not optimal for dorsiflexion. So if you move your hand like this, more in this position here, do a grip and try to move it in extension, you probably can feel it's doing much less than if you're in a neutral position like this. You can move it much more. And if you grip it the way I put here in the picture, it also will trigger more radial deviation, and yeah, that's not good. So I really have a look with my students that they have a proper right arm position here from the radial and ulnar component here. So I don't want it this way here. And yeah, and the next thing is, I think it's very, very important in your backswing, especially in your backswing, that you have a proper amount of width and a proper elbow structure. You can see in the picture here, on the slide here on the bottom right, the difference. So on the left picture, you can see the left person. That's me, by the way, as you can figure out. He has I have the elbows separated apart a lot. I lose connection, and the wrists break down. And the other one, I have a better structure. I like to work with like a tour striker ball or something in between my arms, just to get a feeling of having the elbows closer and further away, and that also fixes the wrists normally, and it gives you a good opportunity. Then you could do this little dorsiflexion move in the downswing. So before you start working on that move, better be sure the grip is okay and you have a good elbow structure. Well, so next thing is, of course, awareness. You have to be aware that this is happening. I like to use the HackMotion sensors with the biofeedback tool when I do this. What I actually do is, when I calibrate, I let the people do a little fist and I let them extend as far as they can. And I look at what they actually are extending to. Normally it's like 50, 55 degrees, depends on the player and depends on his flexibility. Typically, you will see that they can do a little bit more in the swing than they did in static. But that's basically what I will set as the tone. So if I see he does like 55 degrees, I probably will set it between 60 and whatever, 90 degrees or something. And I let him do swings, and I want to hear the beep in the downswing until he has reached P6. And I think that has helped players a lot to actually hear that noise of the sensor beeping while doing this little move here. So great stuff. Then also you need proper pressure shift and a very good body pivot, basically. I will not talk in detail about this, of course, now, but I can tell you, if your pressure is on the right side and you're struggling to get a proper body rotation, your wrists are going all over the place. So if you don't have that, it probably will not happen. But I've seen it the other way around. If I fixed the wrists, I've seen better pressure shifts. So yeah, I would like to know what other people maybe think about this. Yeah, now let's talk about my friend Doris. Actually, this is one of my favorite exercises. This is a little 9 to 3 swing. So you basically swing the club from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. If you imagine this is a clock, 12 o'clock, 6. So you've got 9 here, 3 here. So it's basically shaft parallel to shaft parallel. And you have to understand, in Austria, we always add an I at the end of a name to create a cute nickname. Okay, so if you say Franz, which is the Austrian name, we speak German in Austria, by the way. Franz is the name for Frank. Franz, we say Franzi. Or Christoph would be Christi. My name is Christoph. Please do not call me Chrissy. Christoph, but it's cute, Chrissy. And Lucas is Luki and whatever. So it's always a very cute name, and you have the feeling it's a nice, friendly person, you know. And then that's where Dorsey comes in. I like to name the move Dorsey. I say, listen, you go to it's 9 o'clock here. So here, you can see it in the pictures, by the way. And then I say, and now I want you to add dorsey. And then they go whoop this way. You can see the center of mass going behind, and they get a very beautiful structure, and then they hit the ball. And it's really funny because my students say, okay, I go up here and dorsey. My friend dorsey. And that's when they give the whole movement pattern basically a name. I just enjoy that. It's really fun because my students start with telling me that dorsey was really, really bad today. so I like that. Dorsey is great. So let's continue. Impact zone. So typically you see from the start, when you do your grip, towards the impact, you will see typically with an elite player extension of increase of extension of 10 to 20 degrees. So they go like, let's say 0-ish, can be anything here, to like what, 50, 60, 40, whatever. Then you increase the dorsiflexion in the downswing, and then they start losing it. But they will remain some, they will keep some for the impact. And that's normally typically 10 to 20 degrees, just saying a rough number. As you can see in the top graph here from an amateur golfer, first of all, you can see on the right top, he doesn't have this little hump, this little hump at P6 where his dorsiflexion peaks actually. He goes early into flexion this way. And you can see down at the bottom that the intersection with the impact zone is much, much lower, so it's more in flexion compared to the start. And in the bottom, you see the professional golfer, and you can see the difference that it intersects much, much higher with more extension at impact and with that little beautiful hump there. So that's something very, very typical I see with amateur golfers and elite golfers. Okay, so what is this good for? To have some extension in the impact zone. It helps you to get a better loft vector. So the loft is a little less here, gives you good compression. It also helps you to control the face angle much better. And also low point. The club will actually won't scoop up this way. If you have this, you have a very short time where it touches the ground. And now here you have much a longer distance. So that will also help your ball striking. But before you chase this here with all of your players, you also have to look at what type of player you're coaching. Because if you are coaching somebody who has a very low club head speed, this will not help him. This much forward shaft will not help him. So you have to look how's his ball flight, and maybe you actually have to add something to it. Depends on the player. So just that you have this point as well. So the next question is, if this is so important at impact, we don't want this here. How do we retain some dorsiflex at impact? You know, we're losing it towards the impact zone, but how do we remain some? And first of all, you need a proper body. You need proper body pivots. Especially your lower body has to do a very good action. The moment you jump on your toes, before impact, everything will break down, and you will extend your arm, and you will do this movement here. And you need a proper body rotation, so you can also curve your hand path more to the left. So if you look at the top right picture, you can see I'm curving the hand path to the left. And actually, that's something, when I do that, I get it perfectly every time. If I don't think about curving my hand left, I get this as well. So this is a very, very strong feeling for many good players, that they curve the hand path to the left. That also helps the body rotation. Yeah, and so the next thing is, if you want to have a proper position here at impact, you also need some trail arm flex. As you can see in the lower picture, the moment you have an extended arm at impact, you will see this movement again, that the wrist is going more towards flexion, and this is not what you desire. So there has to be some trail elbow flexion, as you can see in the lower picture. Yeah, and of course, there has to be some side bend to the right if you're a right-handed golfer, because otherwise you cannot support the flexed elbow. So I would say that's one of the toughest things to do for amateur golfers, because they do it sometimes the right bend really early sometimes, which is not what I like, but they don't do it towards the impact zone. So actually you see many times they stay with the right shoulder high, and then they lose their right arm, and that's when you get the graph from the HackMotion all the way down. So you have to understand the whole pattern. It's not just keeping this, you also need to have proper body rotations and side bends and tilts. I think that's a brilliant drill, by the way. That's basically you do a trail hand open drill. We keep the trail hand open. I heard Scott Cox call it the Hell's drill. I've seen it from Mike Adams as well for the side-on golfers. I think it's a brilliant drill because you basically have the hand open and you basically push against the shaft, which motivates you to get a very good pivot, and you tend to keep some trail wrist extension here. So that's a very good exercise. And I actually have a guy, one of my pros, who can hit the ball like, I think with 7-iron, like 165 yards with that drill. So it's a very good exercise. I do it just with little 9-3s. I might maybe get into a 3/4 swing sometimes, but that's a very good one. So let's do a quick wrap up what we learned. So the hands influence each other, but they do not mirror each other. Always look at the overall pattern. So you have to talk to the players what they're trying to achieve, because that's sometimes actually what you're going to measure. And measure both sides and then make decisions, not just from the pure data and say, oh, this should be this way because I said so. It has to make sense. So look what's happening and use it for you as a coach, as a reference for your decisions. I think if there's one thing you remember from the day and you haven't heard about it yet, I think increasing the extension from the trail wrist from P4, from top of backswing to shaft parallel P6, I think that's one of the strongest things you can add in your coaching if you haven't done it yet. Learn proper body movements to retain enough dorsiflexion, wrist extension at impact. And please understand that elbow structure is very, very vital and crucial for proper wrist action. And so you hear it again, dorsiflexion is the holy grail of ball striking, in my opinion. Okay, so
a couple of questions have come in. One is, what are your thoughts on theories that promote throwing right hand as early as possible in the downswing?
It depends what's actually happening. Okay, so I don't want the wrist in this position here at the impact. Definitely not. If that's something that helps the player to get in a proper position, perfect. But I always say you cannot see it in general. It might help some players. It might hurt other players. But in general, I would say you have to have a good body sequence. Yeah, especially this dorsiflex stuff has to happen, in my opinion. If it doesn't happen and you throw the club, it will not be you will have the club over there. So I don't think it makes sense. So, but if you're somebody who loads it nicely and you just can't get rid, cannot get rid of the lag, if you would call it this way, then it might be a good feeling. And if you have people who have very low club head speeds and there's no way you can get them in a position and you give them a throw feeling, yeah, that's probably an option, but I think you cannot give a general answer on this.
There's a question from Matt. Doesn't dorsiflexion come from lead hand going into flexion? So in so sense, both hands play a role in creating dorsiflexion, or is that incorrect?
No, it's not incorrect, but it's also not correct, I would say. It depends. it depends. I have actually, when I worked on this presentation here, I didn't have enough data from people with the wrist extension, because I wanted to actually see what happens when you have a good player going into wrist extension, what happens to the trail side. And I called my best friend, Michael Ettler, and I said, hey, Michi, I have to measure you because you're the worst up here. You got all of this here. And I measured him, and he still had a ton of that and a ton of dorsiflexion in the downswing. He's a very good ball striker, you have to understand. So you would think, okay, just because it does, you would think if it does this should be happening, but it wasn't. It was just happening maybe less than other players. But I would say that's what actually meant with you have to look at the hands separately. You have to find out what is the weakest link. And if you have somebody who's struggling with this, and this is actually doing its job, I rather go for this hand here, just talking about this hand. If you see actually this is starting to move in a good position, but this is going this way, I would probably talk about the lead hand. So that's what I'm trying to explain. I try to make a decision using the sensor and using the measurements on where I start, because I think people have, it's easier for people to talk about one side, either left or the right side. Very few people, I think, can feel it in both hands at the same time. But so that's my take on it.
A question about, does that amount of dorsiflexion at impact directly correlate dynamic loft?
Oh yeah.
So
yeah. But you also have to understand, if you have, let's say you have a ton of this here, a ton of extension here at the impact, and you have a lot of secondary axis tilt, this also might get the club more in a more vertical position again. So it also depends where is your upper center in comparison to the where's your upper center in at impact. So you have guys who are tilted all the way like this, so they can have the wrist like crazy like this, and we'll have a very vertical shaft. And you can have guys who are more this direction, and this will be crazy forward. So I would say the secondary axis tilt also plays a role with this.
Okay. Then there's a question from Matt about what causes breakdown of dorsiflexion and loss of dorsiflexion before impact in poor players.
Yeah, what I see many times is not a proper body pivot. So I see, because I use the force plates, and I see that they are going on the top of the backswing. They go early with their trail foot to the toes, and then basically they stand on both toes for a short period of time. So they only can go this way, just very basically do a sliding. Then they pop out, make early extension, and that's where they throw the club normally. That's something what you see. You have to understand the moment you're not really turning anymore, or you're stalling the body, you have to throw the club. Basically, it's going to go. So that's where you lose it. Yeah.
And do you see players overdoing extension of the trail wrist?
Yeah, it can happen too. I mean, what you will see is if they overdo it and they have a big problem going really early in this here. I think Monty Champlin talked about this a little earlier. This is definitely everything what is too extreme, except your name is Dustin Johnson. But if you do it too extreme, normally for the average golfer, for the normal golfer, it's not what you want. So I would say, yes, it's possible to do too much. You can do probably too much of everything, yeah.